Are the nuclear talks between the United States and Iran on the verge of blowing up? I'm Yair Pinto, and this is a special edition of Boots on the Ground. We'll take a look at this story and many other things that slipped past this week, with a focus on the big question of this war: will Israel strike Iran? That question has been on everybody's mind for the last several months, but this week, several new developments arose which make it more urgent than ever. This week, an IAEA report, the International Atomic Energy Agency, reported that Iran possesses enough enriched uranium for 10 nuclear bombs and continues to produce it. The report further states that Tehran holds nuclear materials at 3 sites that it failed to declare, and warned cooperation with Iran is below expectations. So against the backdrop of Washington's warnings of a possible Israeli strike, the Prime Minister's office issued an unusual statement on Saturday, Shabbat. The report proves Iran's goal is to create a nuclear weapons program, and the world must stop it. Tehran responded with rage, calling it a political biased report and otherwise questioning the motives of the Austrian government, which was the source of much of the information and the intelligence that was quoted in that report. And elsewhere, Iran's foreign minister reported that the latest United States proposal flatly declared that if Iran is not allowed to enrich uranium, there will be no deal. In this view, there is a reason that only a few countries master the ability to fuel nuclear reactors. Beyond significant financial resources and political vision, a solid industrial base and a comprehensive technological academic complex are required for this. But even more significant, despite the long-running talks between the United States and between Iran, and also messages from both sides about willingness to sit at the negotiating table, this week the Supreme Leader delivered an unequivocal statement. Will United States President Donald Trump change his course? In any case, the nuclear negotiations between Tehran and Washington now stand at a severe crisis following new American demands and a security escalation in the regional arena. Also, this week, President Donald Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin in a call that lasted 75 minutes and was mostly focused on the Ukrainian drone attack that destroyed several of Russia's strategic bombers. But other issues were also discussed, including Iran, with President Trump warning that time is running out. We will need a definitive answer from Iran very soon. After this call, he also said that he and President Putin had agreed that Iran will not possess nuclear weapons. And in related news, analysts are asking if the sanctions on Iran's Revolutionary Guards work as they are supposed to, and an answer to that question can be found by looking at the numbers. In the Trump era, the sanctions have hit one of Iran's sorest points: oil exports to its biggest customer, which is China, which saw a 20% drop in May compared with May of 2024. So we'll dive into Iran's clandestine moves to transfer oil and the question mark over the continuation of these sanctions. Also, it appears as if Iran's maneuvers caused the Islamic militias to be emboldened to fire at Israel from Syrian territory this week. The rockets from Syria came around the same time as the ballistic missile attack from the Houthis in Yemen, and it might have been part of a larger Iranian plan to try and apply pressure in the nuclear negotiations. Why is all this happening now? Well, one reason might be that Israeli security sources say that Iran is very worried about the results of President Trump's visit to the Gulf states and about the strengthening of the Sunni axis in Syria. So with all of this in mind, we must ask the question about why Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar are trying to restrain Israel, strengthening their ties with Iran, and opposing any military strike on its nuclear facilities. And speaking of a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, the Iranian regime tried to send a signal this week that it was ready to defend against such a strike, but their plan backfired and ended up exposing the truth about how unprepared they are. However, it is undeniable that Iran is strengthening its air defensive capabilities against a possible strike after its S-300 anti-aircraft defensive systems were damaged by Israeli attacks last October. Despite the damage, experts assessed that large portions remain intact and were repairable, so complex planning will require to hit these nuclear facilities and also to avoid the strikes of the S-300. So Israeli officials are reportedly worried that President Trump wants to avoid a military strike so much that he'll be willing to compromise on his own red lines regarding Iran's ability to enrich uranium and other important issues. So there's a lot at stake, and the time to make a decisive decision is running out fast. So guys, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground Weekend Edition report, delivering the truth about what is happening in Israel on day 607 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the orders of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And guys, this evil entity is not just threatening Israel, they are also threatening the United States of America. They call Israel the small Satan and America the big Satan. So we need to stop them together. And God, as you know, God will help us because He has all the cards and all the information that we don't. But a moment before we begin, I wanted to say thank you to all the support helping us share the truth. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, and share this video with somebody that wants to know what is happening in Israel. By doing that, you really help us reach more people around the world. And if you want to help us also financially, you can hit the super thank you button or the donate button on YouTube. And also, you can go to tbnisrael.com/give, and any amount that you give will go to creating more content, more videos, and more updates so that you'll know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So let's begin this report. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them as we explain the situation here in Israel. So now let's begin with the report. This week, a report was published by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, and the report cited evidence that under the cover of nuclear talks with the United States, Iran has continued to produce high-level enriched uranium at a rate sufficient for one bomb per month. The office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel responded to the report, stating that the report shows that the purpose of Iran's nuclear program is not peaceful. Iran is determined to complete the creation of a nuclear weapons program. The international community must stop Iran. Iran also responded with a statement by the Foreign Ministry saying that the report is politically biased and includes baseless accusations. However, the IAEA said in its confidential report distributed to member states that Iran increased its stockpile of 60% uranium to 408.6 kilograms, which is an increase of 50% over the 274 kilograms that it held in the beginning of February. According to the IAEA metrics, Iran possesses enough enriched uranium for about 10 nuclear bombs. If it chooses to produce to weapons-grade enrichment of uranium of its stockpiles, that will be catastrophic for this region. The report added that the IAEA cannot verify that Iran's nuclear program is intended for peaceful purposes only, saying that the significantly increased production and accumulation of highly enriched uranium by Iran, the only non-nuclear weapon state producing such materials, raises serious concerns. In subsequent statements, the IAEA also presented a more extensive report detailing Iran's failure to cooperate with an investigation that began in 2019 concerning undeclared nuclear materials found in Iran. The report was demanded by European powers after Iran repeatedly failed to give credible answers to the IAEA questions about the nuclear material, but Iran claims it answered with all available information. So in its report, the agency stated that Iran's lack of answers and clarifications led it to conclude that Tehran had an undeclared structured nuclear program until the 2000s and that some activities used undeclared nuclear materials. In other words, despite closing the declared nuclear program in 2003, Iran continued to produce, develop, and test materials for its nuclear program while the IAEA inspectors operated inside the country. American officials estimate that it would take Iran less than 2 weeks to convert the stockpiles of enriched uranium to 90% weapons-grade material, which is sufficient for one nuclear weapon. However, it is important to remember that enriching uranium to weapons grade is only the first step towards a nuclear bomb. The full weaponization process, including developing a detonation mechanism, miniaturizing the warhead, and fitting it on a missile, and this could take at least additional few months. Nonetheless, evidence has already been presented in the past that Iran is actively producing detonators and other materials for nuclear warheads. In fact, the report further indicates that Iran conducted a small-scale experiment to produce a nuclear reaction at the Levisian Shiran facility in northeastern Tehran. This is presumably to test whether it could build weapons using such a reactor, but the agency believes that equipment for handling the nuclear materials and quantities of fissile materials were kept at the Levisian Shiran without Iran, and Iran did not declare this to the inspectors of the International Atomic Agency. This is the problem here. So guys, I want to pause for a moment and say hi to everybody who joined this broadcast. Hope you are having a good time wherever you're coming from. I don't know if it's evening, morning, or night. Please let us know what country you're coming from and why did you decide to watch this. Do you want to know stuff about Israel, the Middle East, interested in news in general, or you want to know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem? And let me know why you joined us today. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Yair Pinto, and I'm the host of Boots on the Ground. And today we're giving you a weekend summary edition. Please hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground and know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and for Israel. Today we're diving into the story of Iran's nuclear capabilities and also the nuclear talks between Iran and the United States of America. It's very important for you to know that to bring you the truth day after day, my team and I are working very, very hard. There's big people behind what I'm doing, researchers, fact checkers, proofreaders, and also video editors and cameramen and much more. So this is a big operation. We take our work very seriously. If you guys want to help us, you can donate on the donate button on YouTube. You can hit that super thank you button. And also you can go to tbnisrael.com/give and make a donation. Every donation will go towards creating more videos just like this one. We are fighting a spiritual battle, and the enemy is using lies and deceit in order to trick the world to believing something that is untrue. Okay, so You're surely asking where the negotiations with Iran are standing right now. Okay, what's up? So to start with, since the nuclear contacts were renewed between Washington and Tehran, the Persian Gulf has once again become a crowded chessboard. So here are the main points of the American proposal: Iran's red lines and also the dangers reported by the intelligence and the monitoring agencies, everything in chronological order so that you can see how it all fits together. So stay with me, okay? According to American and European sources, the White House presented Iran with an interim deal. It allows the Iranians to continue enriching uranium to a new level of 3.7%, which is suitable for civilian reactors designed to generate electricity. At the same time, a regional entity, a nuclear consortium, would be established with Saudi Arabia, with the United Arab Emirates, and perhaps Oman participating. That body is supposed to supply Tehran, Iran, with ready-made nuclear fuel enriched to this level, and when that process has been established, Iran will be required to stop all the enrichment on its territory. However, there is a dispute over the location of this proposed facility, as the United States is demanding that it be outside of Iran's borders, while Iran has said that enrichment on our soil is a red line. So to bridge this gap, Oman, with Saudi mediation, proposed an interim outline, a facility to be built on an island in the Persian Gulf. To the Iranian public, this will appear to be within the homeland, while Washington can claim that the facility is built on an open island exposed to oversight. The names of the proposed islands are Kish and Kesham, both claimed by Iran. But even this compromise requires legislation, funding, and also political consent, and none of them is guaranteed. So, before we even get to those questions, we must look at what Iran's position is. The foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, spoke to reporters during the visit to Beirut this week and claimed that the draft is filled with ambiguities and raises many questions, and in other words, he did not like it at all. Tehran is expected to formally reply to the proposal with at least a partial negative and will demand a mechanism ensuring continuous enrichment capability, and Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has repeated the message: we will not give up our territory or our centrifuges. On the American side, President Trump declared Wednesday in a post on Truth social media, under no agreement will we allow Iran to enrich uranium. And elsewhere, the White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt stressed that Tehran received a very detailed and acceptable offer. Its rejection, she said, will lead to severe consequences. And, in other words, the military option is still on the table. And speaking for Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the proposal half a step and has continued to push for the complete dismantlement of Iran's enrichment infrastructure, declaring that any compromise that leaves a single centrifuge active preserves the weapons option for Iran. So that brings us to the position of the International Atomic Energy Agency. It has been said many times, but it is important for me to repeat that since 2018, international monitoring has lost a significant part of the knowledge change regarding Iran's nuclear activities. Cameras in centrifuge plants were removed, surprise visits were reduced, and even the centrifuge count is incomplete. Estimates say that Iran holds at least 20,000 centrifuges, some of the advanced IR-6 type, which are more developed and more advanced, and the latest report determined 408 kilograms of uranium that is enriched to 60%, theoretically enough for at least 9 bombs if it is further enriched to 90% purity. This is a process that can be completed in a very short period of time. The 2015 JCPOA agreement pushed Iran a full year away from the bomb. But now, the IAEA inspectors speak of just a few days and admit that they are almost blind when it comes to knowing what is going on inside Iran. Beyond that, even if everything were halted tomorrow, European intelligence agencies assess that Tehran could reconstitute the program within months. Hence, diplomats insist that any new agreement must include a much denser monitoring mechanism, perhaps real-time sensor level. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments about this. So meanwhile, Israel sends open hints that it will not wait idly by. Amidst all this talk, the debate over non-enrichment in Iran, war with Saudi Arabia and Egypt, Riyadh has already signaled that it's going to demand to have whatever Tehran has, whether it's an enrichment path or a fully deployable nuclear weapons program. So it's not just Iran's capabilities that are on the table. It's also a regional nuclear arms race in potential. The American proposal tries to block the race to the bomb by combining civilian incentives, international pressure, and a military threat. Iran, for its part, counts on domestic legitimacy and a familiar tactic, stalling from time while building out its infrastructure, and continues to present a principled line. The foreign minister of Iran, Arakshi, emphasized that Iran has the full right to possess a complete nuclear fuel cycle, and that this is done under the NPT, the agreement for non-proliferation in this region, basically to make sure that only good nuclear is produced in this region. He also said, "We are part of the treaty, like many other states. As long as we do not seek nuclear weapons, there is no legal basis to prevent us from civilian enrichment." This is according to the Iranians. And a senior advisor to the Supreme Leader, Ali Larijani, added that the negotiations will succeed or fail, and it all depends on the sanity and the morality of the American side, adding, "The issue is not technical. It is a fundamental political matter. We do not aim to obtain nuclear weapons, but we will not abandon our principles." For their part, political sources in Jerusalem clarified that if the talks collapse, Israel will reconsider all the options, and this is including a military action. Israel's demands exceed those of the United States and include total cancellation of all uranium enrichment, unprecedented monitoring, and applying the Libyan model for dismantling nuclear infrastructure. It is difficult to imagine that all these competing interests and overlapping red lines being reconciled, but that is what the diplomats will keep trying to do, at least for now. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth about what is happening between Israel, Iran, the United States, and I want to encourage you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. The topics are very hard, the situation is very complicated, and we do not have all the answers. But we need your help in seeking the truth, creating videos, and sharing it. So thank you so much, and make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Yeah, it really helps us because YouTube has this algorithm, and the more people share, like, comment, subscribe, and do a thumbs up, it helps us reach more people. So please, if you want to help us with our work, hit these buttons. So now that we know what was presented to Iran's regime this past week, let's move to what has happened in the last 24 hours. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei gave a speech on Wednesday at a ceremony to mark the anniversary of the death of the Islamic Republic's founder, Ruhollah Khomeini. In this speech, he sharply criticized the United States' proposal for a new nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic, but he did not explicitly reject it. Khamenei said that the American proposal is contrary to Iranian interests and declared that Tehran will not give up its ability to enrich uranium. And he also added that without it, the nuclear program would be worthless. His exact words were, "The enemy focuses on uranium enrichment because nuclear industries without enrichment are useless. Enrichment is a vital part of Iran's nuclear program. We will not abandon uranium enrichment." He went on to directly address the United States, saying, "Who are you to tell Tehran whether we should have a nuclear program or not? The arrogant states, headed by the United States and Israel, according to him, have led conspiracies against our country, hostile acts against the Islamic regime, and they have also continued since the revolution's victory to this day, and we will continue to strengthen our overall national capabilities. This is the supreme leader that makes all the decisions in Iran." And guys, a few hours later, the White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt issued a statement reiterating the Trump administration's position, saying Special Envoy Witkoff sent a very detailed and acceptable proposal to the Iranian regime, and the president hopes that they will accept it. If not, they will face severe consequences, as the president himself has repeatedly stressed. However, this week, American administration officials issued several confusing and sometimes contradictory statements about the compromises that they're willing to accept, which greatly worried Israeli officials who fear Trump will eventually agree to a bad deal. Israel defines a bad deal as one that will not deny Iran every future path to a nuclear weapon, will not dismantle its nuclear program completely, nor limit its ballistic missile program or its support for terrorist organizations in the Middle East. So guys, remember that a few months ago, during a visit by Netanyahu to the White House, President Donald Trump surprised Netanyahu with the very announcement of the talks, and he also confirmed that he had warned Netanyahu not to order an Israeli strike on Iran at this moment, one that would foil the contacts for negotiations. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on what is happening in Israel. So help us by sharing these videos, following us on social media, and also subscribing to TBN Israel. And if you want to help us financially create more videos, please go to tbnisrael.com/give. You can also hit that donate button on YouTube. That super thank you. Any way you can help will be a blessing for us, and every dollar will go towards creating more videos like this one. Thank you so much. And speaking of spreading the truth, United States President Donald Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday evening in a phone call that lasted about 75 minutes. During their conversation, which focused on the Russia-Ukraine war, the two also spoke about issues in the Middle East. President Trump told reporters afterwards that he told Putin that Iran cannot possess nuclear weapons, and I believe we both agreed on that, and I told him that he might be able to help in solving this issue. Iran is slow in its decision and will need a final answer very soon. We discussed the issue of Iran and the fact that time is running out regarding its decision on nuclear weapons, which must be made quickly. President Putin suggested that he take part in discussions with Iran and that he might be able to help bring the matter to a quick conclusion. The two also discussed the recent Ukrainian strike on Russia's fleet of strategic bombers and other attacks by both sides, with a focus on an upcoming round of talks aimed at ending the war, which will be held in Istanbul, Turkey. President Trump summed up the call by saying it was a good conversation, but not one that will lead to immediate peace. President Putin said very firmly he will have to respond to the latest strike on the airfields. Needless to say, the war in Ukraine is of great interest to Israel for a variety of reasons, including the fact that this week it was reported that the Israeli defense industry had its fourth straight record-breaking year of exports, with most of the hardware going to European countries worried about the situation with Russia. There was also been a large surge in Jewish people from both Russia and Ukraine making aliyah, meaning immigrating to Israel, over the past 3 years. However, those are long-term strategic developments, and we need to get back to focus on the war against the axis of evil going on right here in front of us in the Middle East. So we'll do that by examining the question of how Israel's neighbors in this region, the Middle East, stand in this escalating crisis. During President Trump's last visit to the Gulf, it was reported that the leaders of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar expressed to him firm opposition to any military strike against Iran. According to an Axios report on the 25th of May, the three leaders told Trump during their meetings with him on his Gulf visit that they oppose any military action against Iran and encourage a new nuclear deal through diplomacy. According to the report, Saudi Arabia even sent a direct message to Iran calling on it to consider Trump's nuclear deal proposal to prevent an Israeli strike. The message was delivered by Saudi Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman, who visited Tehran on the 18th of April and met with Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And another report from the Middle East Eye on the 25th of May said that these states even made clear to the United States that they oppose using their territory or their airspace for strikes against Iran. This resistance to military action on the path of the Gulf states is not new, and it illustrates the depth of the gap between them and between Israel regarding how to deal with Iran's nuclear program. Senior security officials also say that the Gulf states view a military strike as an act that would expose them directly to Iranian retaliation. This could come in the form of ballistic missiles and UAVs fired from Iran itself or from the Houthis in Yemen, which has happened before with devastating effects to oil export infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and also the United Arab Emirates. There is also the possibility of attacks on maritime transport in the Straits of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandab. According to senior security officials, this stance reflects the Gulf countries' long-standing policy of focusing on securing their economic future and avoiding military confrontations that could destabilize them. To be fair, the new Gulf economies depend on attracting foreign investment and opening to the West, circumstances that are not served by regional wars. The fear of the consequences of such a strike also concerns the threat to oil routes, as it became clear after the 2019 Iranian attack on Saudi Aramco's oil facilities. So even at the broader regional level, these states prefer a system of balances with Iran and not head-on confrontation. And beyond that, according to political sources, Trump, who since his first term tends to oppose direct military involvement in foreign affairs, seeks to establish a balanced regime amongst the four major powers, Turkey, Iran, Israel, and the Gulf, to prevent any one of them from dominating the others. Against this background came his decision to temporarily halt the coordination of military cooperation with Israel for a scenario of a strike on Iran in order to give the nuclear deal talks a good chance. And political sources in Jerusalem say that the Gulf states fear of an independent Israeli strike that will stem out of internal political calculation. In their view, such an action would only destabilize the region and sabotage their attempts to shape a new regional order based on understandings rather than conflicts. They curb it, temper its ambitions, and propose a different priority order, one that prefers agreements, partnerships, and containment of the escalation. In the Palestinian arena too, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are not silent. Behind the scenes, they promote initiatives to regulate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, try to bring the two-state solution back to the table, and signal to Israel that it cannot advance normalization without also moving towards the establishment of a Palestinian state. The Gulf policy seeks to contain Iran, not to defeat it, to threaten, but also to keep channels open, and to create an independent opening space in which these states can shape the regional order rather than be its victims. In their view, this is not appeasement, but pragmatism and realism meant to prevent a strategic catastrophe and stabilize the entire Middle Eastern system. However, as in all other conflicts, the other side also has a vote, and the total annihilation of the State of Israel is part of the agenda written into the funding documents of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. And they've also did it in this war. We've seen them not just trying, but firing rockets at us, funding terrorist groups, encouraging groups that want to seek our destruction to be more active and more violent. That's what they've been doing. So it's not a matter of believing if they're gonna do it. They already do it. So for anyone who is just joining us for this live edition of Boots on the Ground Weekend Summary, I'm Yair Pinto, and today we are diving deep into the escalating crisis between Israel and Iran. Now, I'd like to zoom in from the wide angle that we've been talking about this point and focus on a blunder Iran recently has made. So to set this up, the Financial Times news portal reported this week that Iran is working to bolster its air defensive systems as the military prepares for the possibility of an Israeli or American strike on the nuclear infrastructure if talks on its enrichment program collapse. The report goes on to say that Iran's advanced surface-to-air missile systems and radars, including long-range Russian-made S-300s, suffered heavy damage in Israeli strikes last October after Iran launched ballistic missiles at us. So the combination of those attacks with Israel's successful hits on Iran's proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon and also the Houthis in Yemen, has created the perception that Iran is at its most vulnerable point to an airstrike in decades. Nevertheless, experts told the FT that large parts of Iran's air defensive systems remain intact or have been repaired in recent months. So Western intelligence assessments and also satellite images revealed that the S-300 and other anti-aircraft defensive systems near key nuclear sites such as the Natanz and Fordo are recovered and repaired. The report added that Iran is also publicly displaying military equipment, including a weapons parade in Tehran last month during Army Day. So, however, that might have been a mistake, as it showed one analyst that the equipment is likely to be operated at a lower level of effectiveness. So, Nicole Garjaweski of the Carnegie Endowment for the International Peace, it's a think tank, he was quoted in the report saying that Iran definitely wants to disprove the claim that its advanced air defensive systems were destroyed, but during the Army Day parade, it displayed a domestically produced radar alongside the interceptors. Garjaweski said that this radar is unlikely to be as capable as the Russian-built systems that the interceptors are designed to work with, and the Russian systems should have been on display at the parade. It is likely that the reason that they weren't is because they were damaged or destroyed in the strikes, which is exactly what the Iranians didn't want anyone to know about. So despite these mistakes like this, the Iranian regime is trying everything it can to convince the world that it is prepared for an Israeli strike. Mohammad Baghaei, the chief of staff of Iran's armed forces, declared this week that we are witnessing an extraordinary improvement in the country's air defensive capabilities and readiness, he said, highlighting a several-fold increase in investment. The Financial Times report went on to note that although talks with Washington on the future of Iran's nuclear program continue, in April, the United States deployed 6 B-2 bombers, the aircraft's largest ever deployments, to the Diego Garcia Island in the Indian Ocean, expected to be likely launch point for any strike on Iran because it's in a striking distance. So amidst all of these developments, Israel, which has already demonstrated its ability to hit Iran's air defensive system, is pressing the United States to support strikes against Iran as soon as possible. However, experts say that there is a risk that Israel will strike without Washington's consent if it feels that Trump has agreed to a soft deal. The FT report added that during last year's strikes, Israel hit radar and missile sites with ballistic missiles fired from beyond the S-300's maximum range of 200 kilometers. Bolsters from the Israeli missiles produced by Rafael, an Israeli company developing military equipment, were found in the Iraqi deserts hundreds of kilometers from the targets. Although the effectiveness of the strikes remains disputed, Iran was clearly hit, and Western intelligence assesses that Tehran believes its air defensive systems did not meet the expectations last year. It has therefore taken steps such as relocating and diversifying launchers and radars, according to two people familiar with those reports who spoke to the paper. However, there is also evidence that Iran's approach to the problem remains uneven, with an analysis characterizing it as fragmented in nature. Nevertheless, a strike on Iran's hardened underground nuclear sites would be far more complex than anything that Israel carried out before, and according to a study published in March by Britain's Royal United Services Institute, if the United States is involved, B-2 bombers from Diego Garcia would likely drop 300,000 pounds JBU-57 bunker busters directly on the targets, vastly increasing the chances that the strike would be successful. So guys, if acting alone, Israel would have fewer options since it lacks heavy bombers or the ability to carry such large ordnance. The FT notes that Israel would likely use F-35 stealth fighters armed with 2,000-pound precision BLU-109 bombs or F-15 strike fighters carrying 4,000 pounds JBU-28 bombs. Each would require multiple hits on the same shaft to penetrate hardened shelters. That could require many sorties, perhaps using aerial refueling tankers that themselves could be vulnerable to long-range surface-to-air missiles or drones. In this context, it's important to note that since last summer, Israel has struck targets in Yemen at least 9 times at a similar distance to a strike on Iran, but the Houthis do not have anything like the air defenses that Iran has. And speaking of which, the FT report continued its analysis by pointing out that during such a strike, Israel and its aircraft would also be within the range of the still active array of short and medium-range surface-to-air missiles and anti-air drones which Iran has bolstered its defenses with. It would be hard to know how many of these were destroyed, and in addition to short-range systems such the Russian Tur M1, Iran's arsenal also includes domestically developed SAMs such as the long-range Bava 373 and the medium-range Khordad 15. So, John Alterman, the chair of Global Security and Geostrategy at the Center for Strategic and International Studies think tank in Washington, told the paper that navigating such defenses will not be simple for Israel, but it is not beyond Israel's capabilities. He added that the Israelis have been training for precisely this scenario for decades. However, we must remember that Iran has also been preparing for this scenario for decades, and suppressing Iran's air defenses before bombing the nuclear sites would be a battle of hours or even days because they redeveloped it. It would be pit air screws against ground-based weapons operators using fighters and cruise missiles backed by electronic warfare aircrafts and anti-radiation missiles to destroy the radars. And Robert Tolastes, a researcher at the United Kingdom's think tank RUSI, was quoted in the report saying that Israel has achieved almost total air superiority over Iran, but such a strike would require waves of aircrafts for several hours. crew fatigue comes into play. The longer they stay over Iran, the higher the chance that something will go wrong. So on that note, I want to remind all of you that here at TBN Israel, we will continue to spread the truth and update you on what's happening in this region, because we want you to know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, because everything that happens in the Middle East does not just stay in the Middle East. It affects all of us around the world. Israel is just a front line of defense for the United States and for Europe. So guys, if you want to support our work, hit the subscribe button, hit the donate button, share, like, leave a comment, leave a thumbs up. It helps us reach more people. And if you want to help us financially, you can also visit tbnisrael.com/give. And every support will help us create more videos just like this one. Guys, also, make sure when you look for official social media accounts of Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani, beware of fake accounts. Look for this blue arrow ribbon to only follow official accounts. There are many fake accounts that are using my face, my name, and trying to scam people to donate to places that do not reach us and do not reach Israel. Okay, so I wanted to take this time and end with a prayer. I wanted to give you some prayer points for the situation. This looks like a very, very complicated deal. A very complicated negotiations between Iran and the United States. So I would focus today's prayer on praying for the leaders of the United States, the leaders of Europe, and the leaders of Israel, and the leaders of Iran and the Arab states in the Middle East to make wise decisions, godly decisions. God can use each one of these leaders to do great things. So let's pray that they will listen to what God has to say to them. Let's pray for defense to the IDF soldiers. Let's pray for the hostages to come back home. Let's unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem. Amen. Thank you so much, guys, for being with me. Hope you have a great weekend or tomorrow weekend. And keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem, the peace of Israel. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to TBN Israel. Thank you.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.